Alrighty, so welcome everyone to part 3 of Relink.org's webinar series addressing opioid addiction as a faith community. My name is Bethany Friedrichsen. I'm the statewide coordinator for Relink.org, a faith-based nonprofit organization that operates statewide. And we started in 2017 with a desire to use technology to connect individuals in need in communities due to addiction to the resources available. We also make an effort to consistently be involved in the community through outreach and education. And we'll talk more about Relink.org here in a little bit. Today, I will be helping facilitate the webinar. So if anyone has any issues, please message me directly through the chat or send me an email at bfriedrichsen@relink.org. Just a couple of housekeeping items to get started. We're so excited today to have nearly 200 registrants for the webinar, representing over half of Ohio's counties and a diverse set of backgrounds from CEOs to ministry leaders, nurses, and pastors. With so many joining us, we want to make sure that everyone's time is used wisely. When you join the webinar, you are all muted. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the chat box or Q&A. I will be monitoring the questions as we go along to ask the speakers during the Q&A at the end. With so many on this call, we may not get to every question. However, we will stay on a little after the hour for those who have time to answer any remaining questions. This webinar is set to be an hour long. Please stick around till the end. At 11 o'clock, we will have some important announcements of how to access follow-up materials. And like I said, you can stay on after 11 if you would like, or if you need to jump off at 11, that's okay. And you will also receive a follow-up email later this week with any information you might need. And that includes any contact information for the speakers today, any helpful resources that they mention, you will receive in the follow-up email. You'll get a recording of this and a certificate that you participated. So those are the common questions I get. I just wanted to address them right off the bat. Like I said, message in the chat at any time if you need anything. And without further ado, I would like to pass things along to our Executive Director, Barbara Campbell for Relink.org, to introduce today's webinar and our first speakers.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Bethany. We're really thankful that all of y'all are here today. I know that we're really excited about this topic of connecting the faith community to be more directly involved in the opioid epidemic and being the solution, in that we know that many in the faith community are on the front lines. Today's webinar is entitled Practical Ways the Faith Community Can Move the Needle in the Opioid Crisis. We have several goals for today. The first one being that we just want to create some awareness about some of the programs that are available in the state. We know that there are many, many excellent faith-based programs. So we'll just give a small sampling today through our presenters. We want to create an awareness of how you can access resources. If someone comes to you needing help, it can be really overwhelming. What are some tools available to help you guide people toward the help they may need? We're also going to share some ways that you can get involved and make some differences in your community. And then some next steps for anyone maybe interested in starting something at their church or in their community. So I want to turn it right over to our speakers. Our first speakers are a father and son duo, Brian D. Wade and Brian S. Wade from the Alpha House here in Northeast Ohio. Brian S. Wade is the CEO of the Genesis Center, where he leads an amazing team of professionals who are committed to helping people overcome the strongholds of addiction. Brian has a personal mission statement of helping individuals and organizations who are committed to bringing transformation to their communities. Brian was born into the home of a pastor and has been in ministry for his entire life, for 35 years. He's been on the front lines in the battle to reclaim our communities from addiction for more than 25 years, making a difference one person at a time. Brian's been personally blessed to help thousands of people on their journey to recovery and to live a life free from addiction. and he's personally mentored dozens of men and women who now serve in various roles and responsibilities in the ministry. Brian has been nationally recognized for his work in recovery and has been an advisor to politicians in Washington regarding issues of homelessness and addiction. He's traveled across the US consulting and supporting nonprofit organizations who find themselves in various types of crisis to help them survive. Brian enjoys spending time with his beautiful wife, Holly, of 37 years. Together they have 3 children and 9 beautiful grandchildren. And one of his sons, Brian, is also with us. Brian D. Wade, as you can tell, also comes from a rich history of ministry. It's definitely a family legacy, which is amazing. Brian Jr., not really junior, but younger Brian, was ordained as a pastor at the age of 20 and served at Lorain County Mission in multiple capacities in the day-to-day operations since the age of 13. In 2014, the opportunity arose for Brian to step in as the men's director of the Timothy House. In 2016, Brian and his father co-founded their new project, the Alpha House. Brian and his wife, Brianna, and at the time their 3 children, felt led to live their business and life in North Ridgeville and go into full-time ministry. Today, Brian, Brianna, and their 5 kids, with a 6th one on the way, live on site at the Oberlin Men's Campus doing full-time ministry 24/7. The Alpha House has grown into 2 men's houses and 1 women's house. The Georgia's house is opening this fall. And Brian is honored and humbled to stand on the platform that his parents and grandparents have built and to continue to honor their legacy. Brian's parents' sacrifice, obedience, and Christ-like leadership is what has shaped him into who he is today. And if any of you know Brian and Brian, their commitment to their work is immense. And we are really thrilled and honored to have them here today. So Brian's, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Barbara. I'll just share a little bit about our background, how we got to where we are. Obviously, we shared that we come from a ministry background. My wife and I had founded a small church in Cleveland back in the mid-90s, and we're doing a lot of outreach ministry to people on the streets in an area known as Crack Alley. And we really don't have any addiction in our immediate family, so we were kind of, I would say, shaken by the things that we encountered, the things we saw on the street. But we also, more than anything, were challenged. We were challenged with how to express the love of Christ to them in a way that was impactful. How do you keep loving people who keep making mistakes and failing miserably? And so it had a lot of impact on who we would become. In '99, my wife and I made the decision to walk away from our corporate jobs and our businesses. We both owned businesses at the time, and to found a rescue mission in Elyria, Ohio. And that was an incredible journey. I don't recommend it unless you're definitely called to it, because the challenges can be really overwhelming, but God showed up in huge ways and blessed us to impact a lot of people there at the mission. We saw a lot of miracles, and it really became the foundation for where our ministry is today. Our children, all of them were born at the time. My daughter, who's the youngest, was 18 months old. We actually left our home and moved into the mission, and we lived there on site for 8 years. Just basically we took over an old church building, and we took a couple offices in the church building, turned it into a living quarters for our family. And when I say turned it into living quarters, we set up some beds and dressers and went to work. So born in the fire, my kids were blessed and challenged to live in that environment. And today we're super blessed to have all of our children, all 3 of them, serving with us. They've grown up, become adults. They've gone out and found their way in the world, got their educations, started businesses and done different things of their own. But all of them have felt called to come back and serve in this ministry and carry on the legacy that God has given us. So we just feel really blessed today to have all three of our children working full-time with us in ministry, and their hearts are just fully turned towards God and towards what we do. I'm gonna let Brian share a little more about the Alpha House and his story.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, Barbara, thank you again for the opportunity this morning to allow us to be on this webinar. Growing up in the mission at the age of 13 was very challenging because we came from a different background, but we got to see the stories of the Bible, the miracles that you see in the Bible, got to see them become very real and see people's lives transformed and changed just by loving on people. Who knew that hope and love could be such powerful tools to transform people's lives? And so growing up in that, it really shaped and impacted my life forever. Even when I wasn't involved in the ministry in any kind of position, me and my wife would take in troubled teenagers in our home and help them get off drugs or help them reshape their life, just because God had planted those seeds inside of us and we just couldn't help ourselves but to try to help people. In 2014, when we made the decision to step in and pick up the baton of the ministry that my parents had started, it was exciting, but also very frightening at the same time, because I had all the responsibility on my shoulders. But 2015 came, and we all know what happened in 2015. We realized how great the opiate epidemic really was. And to see mobile morgues being rolled into our community because we didn't have enough room for dead bodies that overdosed on drugs was earth-shattering and made me realize how great the need really was. And so me and Dad began to talk on not only how we could help, but how could we help at a greater level, and how could we do things at a very raise the bar in this industry. And so we started brainstorming on what that could look like, and that was the birthplace of the Alpha House in the midst of the epidemic. And so we decided to get out of the city. Let's go to the country and get them away from the dealers on the corner and the prostitutes banging on our door, and let's go somewhere where they can be safe and find a place that they can call home, away from home, and start their recovery journey. So God just led us to this beautiful property that you see in the background behind me today, 37 acres in Oberlin, 6,000 square foot house with an in-law suite attached. And we got almost $1 million property for $250,000, which is just a miracle in itself. We then spent 89 days remodeling it, opened it in May of 17. And ever since then, we have been full, and we have been on a waiting list, somewhere between 40 and 60 people to get into our program. People have come from almost every county in Ohio. They've come regionally and even from across the country. People have taken their last money or got a church to sponsor them for an airplane ticket to come to our program. We've never really done any marketing. We have a small social media presence, but the word of what we've done and the lives that have been transformed has kind of grown across the country, and people have come here to get help, and it's amazing. And today, just a short 3.5 years later, we've helped over 600 men, impacted their life with this ministry with just one house. In the midst of COVID, God decided to not be still, but to open more doors. And we were able to open a second men's house and remodel that. It was in very sad shape, and we were able to remodel that, and it's beautiful. And that's in Grafton, Ohio. And then at the same time, the Lord decided we needed some more work. And so he also delivered into our hands a third house, which is going to be Georgia's house. And we are just a few short weeks away from opening the doors and taking our first resident for that house. We named it Georgia's house after my grandmother. She was a praying grandmother. And the reason why I'm here today and I'm standing here to be able to lead this ministry is because of a praying grandmother who believed in her children and her grandchildren. And she spoke destiny over our lives and called out the greatness that was within us. And at her funeral, I promised her that, Grandma, I will continue to carry on your legacy, whatever it takes. And so we're honored to be able to name our women's program after her. And I didn't know it, but in the midst of negotiating and trying to secure the women's house, I found out that there's a church building that's behind that house. And I found out that at the age of 5, 6, 7 years old, I was running around that property, and it was my grandmother and grandfather's church, where I rode horses and played on the pond. And little did I know that this house sat on that property. So God has brought things full circle, and we're really excited. And then, please follow us on social media and stay tuned. We are working on a project in Lake County. We're going to jump over top of Cuyahoga County and go to the other side. And coming soon, there's a project that will be opening up there for men. And God is doing incredible miracles to open up doors there also. So,
thank you so much, both of you. I just wanted to also just ask quickly, what does your program look like? What are a couple of the components of the the programming that you do there?
Sure, I could jump in and say that. So we decided to build a holistic program. There's a lot of faith-based programs that are around Ohio and in other states. A lot of them are really heavy just on the spiritual side, and are really forceful of the Bible and on people's lives. And we didn't want to be that way. We wanted to be faith-based, but we wanted it to be at the center of what we do, but to offer a lot of different elements to help guys re-put their life back together. So we designed a 9-pillar holistic program where we deal with character, we deal with finances, we deal with relationships, we deal with parenting, we deal with nutrition, and we help men rebuild all of these pillars of their life, but we have God at the center of everything that we do. So we never force God on them, but we take our principles from the Bible and we teach them to them. We also have partnered with the Genesis Center, which is the ministry that my dad leads, which is a Christian counseling center, where they offer drug and alcohol treatment, group therapy, and many other services. And we've partnered together to give a full continuum of care and to bring complete healing for the guys that we're working with. We believe in self-reliance. We want the guys to learn how to wash their own clothes, how to make their own bed, how to shop for their groceries, how to cook their own meals, how to do their own dishes. We say your mom and dad don't live here. You're responsible for your life, and you have to put your life back together. And so our program is all built on self-reliance, but we also believe addiction is a symptom of a deep brokenness. And so the day that they come in, we start the journey of helping them find out what is that root that's leading to your addiction and to help them get healing once and for all.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your passion and the incredible work that you're doing and the impact that you're having and hoping to have here in the future as well. We're definitely looking forward to questions. So if anybody has any questions they want to put in the chat or Q&A, we will touch base with both Brian D and Brian S later in the webinar to ask them those questions. So please submit those. So next, we're going to move on to the next component of today's webinar, which is talking about how to access information about local resources. And I'm really excited because I get to share with you a little bit more about relink.org. So relink.org started, as I said in the beginning, in 2017 with the desire to connect people in need to the resources in their area. And we started around addiction, and we also have added in resources for those who have been impacted by incarceration and human trafficking. And our goal is the whole continuum of care. So we've heard that experts say that sometimes people in recovery need about 72 or more different resources along that pathway to full restoration. And when we look at that system, it can be very complex and kind of overwhelming for an individual in need or a family. Our whole philosophy started around personal experience. Our founder, Ray Dalton, who founded the Dalton Foundation, has a son who has struggled with addiction. And when they started to realize what he was dealing with, they really had a difficult time finding information about the resources in the community. They went on Google and they only got a few results. They talked to community leaders, and it seemed that this wasn't a problem only they were facing, but other families started reaching out to them, and even community leaders and people working in this space were kind of having a hard time getting a grasp on who all was doing what, where in the state, and how could they quickly access the information. So relink.org started as a project of the Dalton Foundation with the goal of just being that connector. There's so many incredible resources in Ohio, and we're thankful to get to hear about a couple of those today. But there wasn't, until relink.org, one place where you could go to find that information quickly. So when we launched in 2017, we kind of started out with, based on our own experiences with loved ones in addiction, looking at what things that they needed. We put some feedback groups together as well. We started in Summit County, and then we began to expand outside of the county because our goal was the entire state. So in 2018, we launched 1.0 of relink.org based on those feedback groups, and thanks to some funding through the state of Ohio's Opioid Technology Challenge that we were awarded. We expanded our team across the state to gather that information about all the resources, continuously building on what the community was telling us was needed in a tool that people could use online to find information. And today we have 2.0 that we launched, I believe, in mid-2019. And this was thanks to all of the feedback and information that we gathered through those individuals being around the state. We also added human trafficking resource information because we began to see that there was an overlap between different populations. And if our goal is to look at the whole person and the whole continuum of care, we didn't want to leave anything out. So whether it was incarceration, behavioral health, homelessness, human trafficking, and addiction, all of those things have some overlap and co-occurrence. So we wanted to make sure that we were including all those resources. So the tool that exists today, I'm going to demo for everyone and share with you how you can utilize this to assist someone or to look for resources in your own community. As I said, it is statewide now. We have over 7,000 organizations listed across 64 different service categories, from crisis resources to treatment options, recovery, housing, all the way through to basic needs and employment services. So when someone comes to relink.org and clicks find resources, it brings them to this resource tool. And all you have to do is enter in the city that you want to look for resources. You can also search by county. You can expand your search or narrow it down by mileage, and click in to see what resources are available depending on what you're looking for. So let's say someone was looking for addiction treatment options and they wanted to find outpatient treatment. So under addiction, we have several subcategories, but it is a very quick path to click through and get to the list of information. Say I was looking for residential treatment in the Columbus area. Once I click under residential treatment, it displays the list of organizations closest to farthest. You can also filter by general payment options. You can filter by faith-based organizations, government organizations, and gender-specific services if an organization has been confirmed as certified, veteran-specific, and for pregnant women, because that has some limitations depending on the service. And over here, you can see where it displays some of those signifiers around faith-based. This is a male-only resource. And so that is how the list displays. But the coolest part is once you click in to the organization, it displays all the information about all of their resources and services, their kind of philosophy or mission, and other information about them. You can also go to their website, call, email, and contact them. And these are all live links. You can use this on your phone. It's very mobile friendly, so that if you are working with someone or someone comes up to you and they're in need, you can just go directly on your phone to relink.org and get to this information, make a call within just a couple minutes. And from experience, I've had experience with a loved one struggling with addiction, and it took sometimes hours, if not days, to find information like this. And even if you did find this organization's website, it might take you several clicks through different tabs to find all this information at once. So their payment information, all of that would take you several minutes, whereas here it only takes you a few clicks. You can also print this page if you wanted to, if you were on a desktop and wanted to give it to somebody who is in need. And if you wanted to print off several resources, you can click on several different ones and scroll down to the end of the screen and print. So it really makes it accessible for anyone in need. And we have some great partnerships right now with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, and people leaving institutions are having the staff utilize this to get some resources together for them before they go home, and they use the print tool all the time to print off those resources, get them in individuals' hands so that when they go home to a different county from where they're incarcerated, they can find those resources. I'll go through a couple other sections of the site, and I'll bring up, I'll search another area. So let's look at the Cleveland area. Let's say that someone was in crisis and they came to you, and you didn't know what to do. It was an emergency situation around addiction, and but not a life-threatening one, obviously, that you would call 911. Someone needed to talk to someone, and you weren't equipped to handle it. They weren't just looking for treatment, but they really needed help. You could look for crisis centers, but if they wanted to talk with someone, we also include hotlines that display local, statewide, and national hotlines for you to call 24/7. And these are all links that you could click directly off your phone to get in contact with someone immediately. So we really want this tool to be something that you can utilize in any situation, and know that, even if you're not the one who's fully equipped to address it, there's somebody on the other side of the site that can help you. I also want to just touch base on some of the other categories and areas. So basic needs is a huge one, especially right now that I just got a call this morning from someone looking for a food bank in the Columbus area, and I was able to click through and find all the local food pantries and their information. Every click path is basically the same. It's a few short clicks to get to the information that's needed. And I also want to touch on one of the biggest questions we get on this is, how do we collect this information? How does it get updated? How do organizations add themselves or get added to the system? So when we started, we did a lot of research on our own, whether that was online or through talking to individuals in the community. Then as we began to grow, we created a portal on the site that organizations can use to add and update their own information. After an organization adds themselves, they're vetted, and before they go live on the site, we look over all the information and make sure that there's no issues. So that is a process that we go through. Our staff, every organization has been looked at on the site. And as we've grown, we've gotten resource lists from different communities around the state that are that have created their own resource lists, and we go in and add them to our system. And then as far as keeping it updated, like I said, providers can update, and then our staff also being involved in the community hears about changes. We make updates, and we also go through the information regularly and make data updates and reconfirm that things haven't changed. So another thing, one last thing I wanted to show on this site that I think is really pertinent to faith communities is how to get involved with initiatives that are happening around addiction in your area. So not only could you go in and find all the organizations and maybe get in touch with them to learn about their services, but you could also look at what coalitions and community groups are coming together around addiction. There's a lot of collaborative groups that are looking for volunteers to offer insight, offer services, and be a part of different initiatives around stigma and events in the area of addiction. So for example, in Cuyahoga County, there's different, there's the Opiate Task Force, there's other community awareness associations, things like that, that your faith community could be involved with and offer insight and things like that. And I think it's a great way to know how to get involved. And also it's a wealth of knowledge. The people who are a part of those groups offer a lot of insight, and sometimes if I don't know of a resource, or if there's an area of the state that is lacking in resources, often there's a community group that, even if the resource isn't available there, they'll know how to help an individual. So they're a really, really great source of knowledge, and a way to get in touch with what's going on in your area. So I am going to, I want to touch just briefly on something that we're going to talk about here in a couple minutes, but you'll notice on relink.org, when you go to it, you'll get a pop-up that says, looking for assistance with addiction, talk to a live recovery navigator now. And this actually links, when you call, to Hope Over Heroin, who we're going to introduce here momentarily to talk. And we are so excited about this partnership for individuals who are looking for recovery help to connect to someone live and get assistance on their pathway to recovery. So I'm going to pass things along to our Executive Director, Barbara Campbell, to introduce Hope Over Heroin. And Barbara, if you had anything else that you wanted to touch on about relink.org, please feel free to do that as well.
Well, thank you, Bethany. There's a great presentation. We could sit here and demo it for a long time, going through all the different categories. It's been an absolute privilege to watch this project develop over time. We truly view it as a community effort. When we first started, it was just us sitting around a room thinking what would be useful, but then hearing from the community and everyone around the state has really helped it evolve into what it is today. And as Bethany just touched on, our latest edition, and one thing that always kind of nagged at us was, how can we know that when people need help, it is good to be able to find resources quickly, or if you're advocating for someone, but there are so many times when someone really just needs that live person to talk to. And could we possibly have that opportunity to connect them to a resource? And you know, we had the opportunity to get to know the Hope Over Heroin group from some of their events and getting to participate in some of their events around the state, and then hearing their passion for what they've learned from the events on what it takes and what's involved in walking a person through all that's necessary for recovery. I think Brian's mentioned that as well, of it's one-on-one and it takes a lot of time. Bethany mentioned it can take up to 72 different services. All that can be overwhelming, but we know everyone is worth it. And so having them design their program that they're getting ready to share about was something we were really excited to connect live to. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rosalie and Blazine. So Rosalie is the operations director for Hope Over Heroin, and she has a background as a COO and chief compliance officer for Symphony Financial Services in Fair Lawn, Ohio, and is during this where she got a lot of the experience that has helped her to lead and manage Hope Over Heroin and the challenges it presents in running a nonprofit. Prior to her experience in the financial services industry, she founded the Marana Agency in Broadview Heights, which is a financial services and insurance agency. She served on the Charter Review Commission in the city of Monroe Falls and was a co-leader bringing Anne Graham Lotz to the Gund Arena in 2002. She has been an active leader at Christ Community Chapel for more than 20 years, serving as a women's Bible study teacher, mentor, speaker, and on the prayer committee. She is passionate about connecting those in need with available resources and engaging communities in the battle against addiction. enabling immediate tangible assistance and assisting in long-term recovery. And Rosalie's sister is Blazine, who's with us today as well. Blazine serves as Hope Over Heroin's development director. She brings 25 years of nonprofit and for-profit business development and marketing experience, having started her first business at the age of 23. She has served in key roles for grassroots, national, and international nonprofit organizations, and is especially passionate about faith-based and youth-focused initiatives. Her expertise lies in building programs, businesses, and processes needed to bring visions to reality. Prior to these positions, Blazine founded and grew The Littlest Heroes, which was a nonprofit organization bringing holistic support services to Northeast Ohio children with cancer and to their families. She is responsible for breaking barriers necessary to be the first nonprofit organization other than hospice to serve children and families during their hospital stays in Cleveland's world-renowned children's healthcare facilities. She's been recognized with several professional awards, including the YWCA Women of Professional Excellence, Cleveland Clinic Foundation Speaking of Women's Health honoree, Cleveland Browns Community Quarterback, and is a Cozy Business Plan Challenge winner. So we've had a great list of credentials for all of our speakers today, and we're really thankful to have you all here. So Rosalie and Blazine, I will turn it over to you to share a little bit about Hope Over Heroin.
Okay, thank you both very much for inviting us. We're really honored to be part of this panel. Well, I want to start by just asking, have you lost someone that you love to an overdose? Or do you know someone who has lost a loved one to an overdose? It was the compassion for those whose lives were cut short by addiction, and for those they left behind, that moved 4 pastors from City on a Hill and Solid Rock churches in Hamilton County to summon other pastors and business leaders and civic officials to a meeting to do something about the opioid crisis that was devastating their city. These founding pastors understood that those trapped in the addiction cycle were not turning to the church for the help that they needed. Out of that meeting came a weekend collaboration in 2014 that would later be known as the first Hope Over Heroin rally. They literally took the church to the streets with a weekend outreach that was attended by thousands. And they provided a message of hope and tangible assistance, mobilizing the community's addiction recovery resources in one location. Well, we've held similar rallies throughout the nation, with 85% of them in Ohio. These rallies are free events. We provide meals, live music, people sharing their stories of recovery, a memorial recognizing the loss to the families and the communities of those that have passed. And every rally begins with a prayer march around the venue, and it offers an opportunity to pray with people, as well as for those committing to change their lives through the gospel, to be baptized. And that's an incredible experience to be part of. A large element of every rally is the City of Resources, which is a gathering and representation of an average of 50 resources, including addiction recovery service providers, business owners, and leaders who are interested in being part of the solution, and civic officials and first responders, all given an opportunity to promote their services, explain their platforms, and enlist clients. It's a great opportunity to identify missing services in a geographical location, and it's also an opportunity to network among providers. We've had such positive feedback from those that are engaged in our City of Resources. Although the opiate epidemic demographics have changed somewhat over the past few years, there are some constants that remain. In the first 2 years of operations, heroin addiction and related overdoses reached epidemic proportions, as Brian mentioned. Among the problems encountered at that time, there were not enough facilities that were specific to addiction detox and recovery. There were long wait times to enter a program. There were portable morgues in many communities because of the large number of overdoses. Social services were and remain overburdened with the number of children who have lost parents. Child welfare systems in almost every county are overwhelmed and in crisis, due in part to the opioid epidemic and the influx of children. We've seen grandparents raising grandchildren. We've seen children without parents or grandparents. And there is the escalating health insurance costs related to treating addiction admissions. Every 15 minutes, a child is born in the United States with NAS, which is neonatal abstinence syndrome, meaning the mom was addicted and the baby is born withdrawing from an opiate. A typical $3,500 hospital stay skyrockets to over $66,000 per child. What we observed during that time, there was no tracking that existed from detox to recovery, from release of one facility to another, or more tragically, released from detox or a recovery program with nowhere to go and minimal support. Statistics were skewed because of multiple reentries of the same individual. It made it very difficult to really evaluate progress or effectiveness. And there wasn't a lot of data or long-term statistics for determining what worked and what didn't. From 2016 to 2018, synthetic opioids entered the market. Fentanyl and carfentanil killed thousands in addition to heroin. But at that same time, substantial dollars were poured into new facilities. Many new agencies were established with a focus on recovery, and as great a number of existing medical and mental health facilities added or increased their assistance to the addicted. What Hope Over Heroin observed during that time, there was no central database of providers, and in particular, none with a multiple of filters. It would take hours to search for a facility that met the profile of a client: male, female, pregnant female, type of addiction, dual diagnosis, insurance or lack of, geographical location, outstanding legal issues. Those were some of the factors that had to be considered. There was also a lack of awareness of or access to these newly available resources. There were many agencies with excellent services that were not on the easily visible radar. Recidivism was and remains extremely high. Something in the recovery process seemed to be missing. Reflecting on all of these factors, Hope Over Heroin expanded our vision for service because we believe, and we do believe, that we're unique in this field for a number of reasons. First, we are not a service provider. Our focus is on uniting existing faith and non-faith-based resources and forming collaborations among those who do provide those services. On the practical side, we developed OneCall, software designed to track a client from detox to recovery and facility to facility. Where there was no central database, relink.org solved that paradigm. Our partnership with relink.org and their robust, comprehensive database of service providers has considerably shortened the amount of time required to find an appropriate facility to meet a client's needs. There is nothing like Relink out there. We saw wonderful results from our rallies. One city opened a detox center after becoming aware that there was none within a 50-mile radius, and another was able to utilize some of the funds raised for the rally to put towards a down payment on a women's recovery facility. And what is really exciting, we saw hundreds and hundreds of the people who had given up on life regain their hope that their future could be free of drugs and they could become all that they were created to be. Due to our rally formats, we are on the streets in your communities. We saw firsthand the need for immediate placement into detox or recovery, and we have been able to arrange for transportation from our venues to pre-arranged intake and admission to detox or recovery program. Hope Over Heroin puts a face to addiction that brings the message from our heads to our hearts. We are compassionate. We are also passionate about what we do, working directly with the addicted or their family, remembering those who lost their lives to the struggle. All of this is personal. Those of you who work directly with the addicted experience what we do. We're touched by their struggles, their grief, their desire to be set free, and we want them to win this fight. We believe that one-on-one relationships are a game changer. Building relationships with a client throughout their journey is an essential factor in successful recovery. We recognize that model programs with long-term success incorporate a faith-based approach. That's the heart of who Hope Over Heroin is, and address the hundreds of touch points needed for long-term recovery. Ohio boasts many wonderful addiction recovery resources, and most need to focus on their area of specialty. Their reporting, their geographical or funding requirements, and incorporating another element such as the faith-based element into their programs could be a real challenge. We believe that we can be part of the link, uniting faith and non-faith-based service providers to offer the greatest opportunity for success for clients. So Blazine is my sister. She is the development director. She's going to introduce you to a faith-based continuum of care model that we've developed. Blazine.
Thank you. The diagram you see, I want to share, is a very simplified version of a very comprehensive system. And it was developed by addressing the hundreds of variables and touch points that you have heard about, and from those who have successfully recovered from opioid addiction. It is in part a result of witnessing the success of Heritage House in Cincinnati. And that's a men's recovery program established by Pastor Jonathan Price and Pastor Billy Price, two of our founders at City on a Hill Church. And they are why Hope Over Heroin exists. Exactly like Alpha House and some of the other agencies we worked with, through our experience, we began to see what was working and that all of these issues had to be addressed. As we review this model, I ask you to consider if there is a role you may be able to fill, or do you have the capacity to replicate the components of this model in your own community? We are in one of 3 program development phases, so your inquiries and involvement are welcome. Stage 1 just represents when people enter into our system, and through our rallies, which are currently on hold, we became known for providing immediate placement. And we come as close to that as possible for those who contact by phone and social media. We receive inquiries from those struggling with addiction, their loved ones, police departments, churches, service providers. And through this partnership with Relink, we've been able to increase our outreach and the number of people served. We're so thankful for that opportunity. The second part is an assessment. This is not a clinical assessment. We have a trained navigator that answers the call and obtains just the information necessary to address that person's immediate need and place them accordingly. 96% of the people that call us are in crisis, and they need either immediate detox or immediate treatment. So we obtain a HIPAA form so that we can work in the capacity that we are presenting with you today. The person's placed according to all the variables that you've heard mentioned previously. We arrange transportation when that's necessary. I do want to mention, if you can imagine all of those variables and what it took to identify facilities or even locate who was available and who did what, Relink, it was like it was designed for what we're doing. So I can't stress enough how that has minimized our placement time. Our placement is dictated in large part by insurance. So 7% of those we serve, only 7% have private insurance. 15% are uninsured and 78% have Medicaid, which limits where they're going and the length of program times available. While a person's in detox, we align treatment, and that is where a faith mentor, a peer mentor, and a mental health counselor are introduced. I want to say, when I say we are doing this, we are just aligning services. We are not the service provider, so that's important to note. The mental health counselor, even as Brian mentioned, they need to identify the root causes of that person's addiction, which vary from person to person as humans vary. They are responsible for developing the person's Partners in Recovery plan, identifying what other specialized areas and people are required for that plan to address legal, financial issues, or whatever is overwhelming to that specific person that's in retreatment. Baselines are established so we can measure the changes in attitudes and behaviors associated with addiction recovery, mental health issues, and where are they in their position on faith. The way we approach our faith-based component is that we offer a faith mentor in alignment with the church family at this and every phase of recovery following. A person might not be interested in having anything to do with the faith community now, but we trust that by planting that seed, they will eventually lead them to involvement in the future. The rebuilding process begins, again, by redeveloping life, social, communication skills so people can regain a sense of their confidence and self-esteem that is often lost during a struggle with addiction. There's a focus on mending broken relationships, making restitution for wrongdoing, and community service involvement. I want to share this because at one of our, I think it was our Columbus rally, we had men from the refuge who came and stepped up to provide the food and set up and serve hundreds and hundreds of people. And those were men in recovery. And I remember what an impression it left on me, because 3 of them were just sitting and talking. And I walked up and they said, you know, this is the first time I volunteered and it feels good. And that component of community service, to give somebody a sense of value of what giving does, I don't know that you can achieve that in other ways. So that community service piece is really important. Stage 6 is for preparation of life outside the continuum of support while they're in active treatment. We need to have an established personal support network, identify the external supports that are going to be used, again, offer a church connection. And also, this is a large piece of the puzzle, is develop an excitement for where their career is and what the opportunities are. Identify employers willing to train or hire. Again, this is modeled after what's been successfully done in Cincinnati, and there are so many businesses willing to take an active role in developing the skills necessary for as they re-enter back to the community. Basic financial management is another piece. And then finally, when all this is through, would be the place where a graduation of a program occurs. And there's just indicators of what that would look like. And it's a different time. It takes different times, obviously, for different individuals. So a secure job and housing, active church membership and involvement, community service, healthy network of family, friends, and activities. And after that person is clean for a minimum of 1 year, they in turn can be trained to be a peer mentor, offered opportunities to provide their testimonies of recovery. At Hope Over Heroin's rally, we have a large stage and platform, and through live and recorded testimonies, it's an important part of moving past their road to recovery. They can expect to hear from us for a monthly check-in for 1 year and for quarterly check-ins in 2 years. And I think that's important because then we can begin to report to the community of what is working and what is not. While we welcome statistics showing otherwise, we estimate that less than 10% of the addiction service providers in Ohio and the surrounding states offer this full spectrum of services under one roof, just such as Alpha House described. That isn't a bad thing, but as Relink shows, there's thousands of resources in the needed specialty areas throughout recovery. But what we can do as an unbiased non-service providers, we can serve communities in a really unique capacity. We can follow that person through each step and facility of recovery and provide the additional supports needed, serving as an extension to service providers. We can identify when triggers or challenges occur that might lead to relapse, but most importantly, we can strengthen the work of every service provider, and that's part of this continuum of prayer. And I think we will see improved outcomes for both providers and community. We are simply using the existing resources that exist in each community to create a cohesive force. So the more people understand that these are the requirements of recovery, I think the more people will be part of solutions. So we welcome the opportunity to either provide you with this information so you can present it, or to provide speakers to present this model. You can also contact us if you're interested in 2021 rallies. There's so many options for what this does, but the rallies do serve and have served as the first step in mobilizing a community in the fight against addiction. So
thank you.
Thank
you so much, Blazine and Rosalie, for sharing this incredible program that you've developed. I'm so excited to see this continue, and I'm excited that we get to be a part of it. So I want to make sure that we get to a few questions before we get to 11 o'clock. And so if anybody has questions, please continue to send those in either through the chat or the Q&A. And also we have some general discussion questions we're going to ask the presenters. First, we have a question in the Q&A for Alpha House. The question is your program abstinence-based only, or is medication-assisted treatment involved on a case-by-case basis? So if one of the Brians could respond to that one, great.
Sure. Yeah, we offer MAT to our clients. So if that's something that they're interested in, it is available to them. You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll see if there's any other questions. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So Rosalie or Blazine, have you begun scheduling rallies for 2021 yet?
We've begun discussions, but obviously the distancing requirements for rallies are on hold, but we do have a drive-through scheduled for September 20th in Lake County that we're going to be doing, and really we're developing as things unfold.
Okay, great. And how can they continue to find out about that? On your social media?
Social media, websites, and that phone number 844-HOPE-777.
Okay, awesome.
If you're interested in scheduling one, definitely contact us and we'll begin discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to have them in 2021.
Yes, yeah, that'd be great. I want to ask all of you, and you can take this in whatever order you want, but how can people, and I think you've touched on some of this, but are there other ways that faith communities can get involved with the work that you're doing, or suggestions you have for faith communities getting involved with addiction and treatment, or whatever that looks like in their community? Are there any suggestions? I know that there's a way that they can get involved with Hope Over Heroin. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, Rose, you want to share how the...
So what I would say first is that we believe that the faith community has a huge role in this, and we believe it's really the greatest chance or opportunity for revival that we've ever seen. We have men and women that are making the decision to make their life better, and they need as many people around them as possible, and as many relationships as possible, and as many people believing in them. So what we've seen that has worked incredibly, and it's part of what I've seen on the Hope Over Heroin's model, is seeing people from different congregations and different faith organizations in the community plugging into our local recovery houses and just loving on the guys and the ladies that are in the houses, even if it's just having coffee with them, talking to them, listening to them, building relationship, because when they leave the recovery house, they need people in the community that can be there to help them through those tough times and answer questions and love on them and be supportive of them, because they may not have anybody. In some instances, people have to leave their family because it's a toxic environment, or their significant other. They have to really start over. So you don't have to have any credentials. You can just be the hands and feet of Christ, and you can just love on people. Love goes a long ways. That would be a simple response that I would say.
Okay, great.
The only other suggestion I would have, there are organizations like Celebrate Recovery that a church might be interested in bringing into their community if they don't have a support group. What Brian said is exactly true, and what addicts that have recovered have told us. I had one tell me just 2 weeks ago, I made it because someone walked alongside me. That is what's needed, the love of Christ shown in tangible, practical ways. Just being a friend, being available to take someone to appointments, sharing a time when just a discussion needs to be had for encouragement. So getting involved at that level is what's desperately needed. And we know from the rallies that we've had and the churches that have been involved in our rallies that many churches just don't know what they can do to help the addicted community. And what they can do is get involved personally by being willing to work with an individual in the way that they need your assistance.
That's great. Thank you. And Barbara, I think that we had a great couple responses from a pre-survey that we sent out, even from an SUD provider that made a suggestion of how faith communities can get involved.
Yeah, thank you guys for this great discussion. We did do a little pre-survey that was kind of geared toward two audiences, asking the faith community about what they're doing, and then also asking addiction service providers how they see the church could be beneficial to what they're doing. And we got some really interesting answers that might be some practical, that go along to what Brian and Rosalie and Blazine have been saying of ways. I think there's sometimes a mindset of like, I just don't know how to get involved. It seems really complex. And I think we did share today that it can be complex, but yet it's also so simple of just seeing how you can find an organization to partner with one-on-one and just walk people through what they're struggling with. So just some different answers that we got were that people from churches could come in and volunteer at facilities to lead and start Bible studies, just to meet with people one-on-one, just as was just shared. We had a Narcan provider share that it would be wonderful to be able to come into the faith community and share Narcan in the church community to get the Narcan in more and more people's hands so that a life can be saved in case of an overdose. Other comments we got were just to help the service providers create awareness of the services in the local neighborhood. So perhaps partnering with a treatment facility that's in your neighborhood and talking about it in your church would be helpful to just create that awareness. Other people suggested to just get involved, as Bethany was sharing, get involved in the task forces. And those things, you just develop so many different relationships that will take you down a path. And we just also encourage you, another one, the last one that was shared that I think was also really good was about providing the addiction providers, the faith community can provide addiction service providers with information that their church is offering. Because I think the addiction providers are keenly aware that when a person does leave their program, there's going to be challenges for that person. So if the church can make aware of what they're doing in that area, that would be very helpful for those addiction service providers. So I think there's just definitely a lot of ways to just kind of reduce some of the barriers and some of the thoughts that, oh, wow, this is so complicated. And while we don't want to minimize the fact that it is a challenging long-term process, there are things that can be done to support the work that's ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I know that we are a couple minutes past. I just want to do the final announcements so that if people need to step off, they can. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you especially to our speakers for the work that they're doing and willingness to be a resource as well for other communities across the state who maybe want to get involved and start something else. A couple follow-ups and next steps. Please take the follow-up post survey for the webinar. Once you close out, it should pop up in your browser. If not, you'll get it in the automatic follow-ups email that Zoom sends out, as well as my follow-up email you'll be receiving within the next day or later tomorrow. And that will include, like I said, all the information from this webinar, all the presentation information, the recording of the webinar, and any materials that we shared and resources and information. So you will receive that soon. Please register for the next webinar, the last one in this series, which will be on September 10th, and we have some great panelists from the faith community going to be involved with that. You will also see on that news page that we have another webinar next week on September 2nd around human trafficking. So if that's of interest to you, please register for that. We're going to give an update on human trafficking in the state of Ohio and what's being done, how you can get involved. And then lastly, please join the Facebook group, Ohio's Faith in Recovery. We do not want these discussions to end here today. We don't want the activity around this topic to end with this webinar series. We want to keep that going, keep being able to support each other around the state and share insights, share questions, and ways that we can work together. So if you search Ohio's Faith in Recovery on Facebook or go to relink.org on Facebook and our groups that we have, you will find that and ask to join. And once you join, please introduce yourself so that we can get to know you. And I will leave this slide up so that you can continue to look at these next steps and reach out to me if you have any questions. I'll see if there's any additional questions that people have asked, and we will continue the discussion for a few more minutes. But if anybody has to leave, that is okay. And we just thank you so much for joining us. Someone asked about the past webinars. We will share those as well. They'll be on our YouTube. Yes, Barbara responded. Let me see if there's any last final questions or things that we want to address with the panelists.
Bethany, I'd like to share just a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's past the time and some people are leaving, but I just wanted to say that one of the things I think it's important to understand is the mind of the person dealing with addiction. They're dealing with, first of all, they're dealing with some kind of pain, whether it's physical or emotional. And, you know, addiction is rooted in the idea that, you know, I feel a certain way. I don't want to feel that way anymore. So I'm going to take something so I feel differently. Yeah. And it could be physical pain and emotional. And there's a lot of rhetoric that surrounds addiction, because there are a lot of people that say, well, it's a choice. And the idea, you know, the definition of addiction is that they've lost control. It's no longer a choice. So yeah, it may have started as a decision. But a lot of times what we're dealing with today, especially with the opioid crisis, people didn't decide to take a drug. Their doctor prescribed it to them because of a pain or an injury. And now they're addicted and they've turned to street drugs. So, you know, they're dealing with a lot of shame and they're dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety. And so if you're going to minister to them, you need to understand the mindset. And then also I wanted to say, you know, in practical ways, the thing that they need the most is love and hope. So if you're trying to reach to somebody that's dealing with addiction, you know, first of all, don't dehumanize them. You know, we in our society, we like to label people and call them addicts. And we make a big deal about saying, no, you're a human that's dealing with addiction. Jesus did a great job of separating the humanity from the issue in a person's lives. When we see in the scripture, it says that we saw a woman who had an issue of blood. We had different, you know, he separated the issues from as a man who was lame from birth. So, you know, speak to humanity. And most importantly, encourage them. Let them know that they can recover, that there's hope for them, that there's, you know, there's opportunities available to them. And if you can help them connect to services, there's some great resources for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. Do any of the other speakers have any last thoughts that you want to share with the remaining attendees that are on?
Yeah, I want to say something about Relink. You guys have done an incredible job of the platform that you have developed. It's so greatly needed. I know other states are jealous. They would like to have this in their state. And I'm sure there's plans for you guys to expand there, but there's so many times I've actually made it part of our protocol for our team that answers the phone. If we can't give them an answer, we help them navigate to Relink and find solutions for their county or where their district, wherever they're at, because you guys have done an incredible job. I have not one time not been able to find a solution for somebody by going on there and searching and seeing what's in that area. Many times there's a dozen or 24 solutions. So we're so thankful for you guys coming alongside us and working together, and what an incredible resource you guys have created. So thank you for the work that you've done.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, those kind words, Brian. We really appreciate that and are so glad, that's the whole reason that we're here and we're doing this. So I'm so thankful that it's been useful to you and your team. Any other final words? Anyone else? If not, we thank anybody else who is still on the call. And if you have final questions, you can send them to me via email if there's anything else that you think of. If you're, kind of have the wheels turning about what you want to do in your community and then come up with questions later, you can send them my way and I can forward them along. So thank you all for taking the time today. We are so blessed to be talking with you all, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see you all on the Facebook group. So thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. It was an excellent job. We thank you guys for your time.
Have a blessed day.
Bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.